Uh, this is the Recording Academy. Recording Academy is the organization responsible for the Grammy Awards. Um, so this is the mission of the Recording Academy. A lot of people think the Recording Academy is just there to, give out Grammy Awards and all these nominations, but there's a lot more that happens behind the scenes, a lot more responsibilities, a lot more perks, a lot more, you know, duties towards musicians and creators out there. So this is basically a simple mission of the Recording Academy that I'm a proud member of. I'm a voting member of the Recording Academy. These are some of the, some of the responsibilities, some of the perks that we have to, you know, uh, undertake and be responsible towards. Just as an example, we have right here Songwriter of the Year, Non-Classical Grammy Award. I have this image right here because this is a new award that was, introduced a few years ago. Earlier, we only used to have a Songwriter of the Year Classical Award, which was for classical music and jazz music and folk music. But they added this new award, which gives out, this very special award to people who make modern music, pop, hip hop, R&B, all those kinds of genres. So this new award was introduced by the Recording Academy. So all of the new awards, all of the new changes that happen behind the award process, everything that is part of the job that we have to do at the Recording Academy. This is not my particular job. I am a voting member of the Grammys. This is more on the back end, the staff that works at the Recording Academy that goes through the board and then the governors. They go through this process and then add new awards and new changes whenever required. The Music Fairness Act, this is again part of our job, our responsibility as a member, part of the advocate process, where this is a new act being pushed in America right now with the Congress, because in the past, ever since, FM and AM radio has been there in America, the surprising thing is that the royalties uh, that you earn with after your music gets played on radio, that does not go to the artists. That only goes to the songwriters behind the music. So there is no performer royalty, which is very surprising. A lot of people don't know that. So if I'm only a songwriter, if I'm only an artist and not a songwriter on that song, I will get zero royalty from my song being played on the radio. So this is a new act being pushed, which the Recording Academy is pushing to the Congress. The Music Cares organization is part of the Recording Academy as well. They had a huge role to play this year and late last year because of the LA fires. They raised $7 million at the post the Grammy Awards. The Grammy Museum is another organization where a lot of programs take place, a lot of events. There's a lot of history that one can learn. This is in LA, near downtown LA. So yeah, this is part of the the whole process. So the Recording Academy is not just handling awards. All of this is in that orbit. Uh, these are some of the membership benefits. So when there are two kinds of memberships broadly, uh, professional membership and voting membership. Professional membership is for people like managers and A&Rs and PR people and marketing people, anybody who works behind the scenes in the music industry. Um, Voting members are people who are actually involved in the creation of the music. So producers, engineers, songwriters, rappers, singers. Um, all of the perks right here that you see and all of the responsibilities that you see, all of them are available to professional and voting membership. We can submit works for Grammy Awards consideration. The only big perk and the only real advantage that the voting members have, that they can actually vote. The professional members cannot vote. The voting members can actually vote for the Grammy Awards. So there are two rounds of voting. The first round of voting decides the nominations, and then the second round of voting, which happens about 45 days post that, decides the winners. So yeah, so these are some of the responsibilities. Uh, how do you join how do you become a member of the Grammys? This is, lot of people reach out to me for this from the industry. It's I wouldn't call it a complicated process, but it's something that you sort of have to earn through your career. You have to put in the work. You can't be in the industry for 2 years and be like, hey, I want to be a part of the Grammy Awards, unless you're like a Grammy winner, you know. Then it comes way easier, or a Grammy nominated artist. But if tomorrow, if Hanuman Kind was only 2 years into the industry and he has this big hit, yeah, it'll be easier for him to be a member because he's had a huge hit, a global hit, so it becomes easier. But otherwise, I became a member in my 13th year in the industry. Of course, I wasn't really aiming every year, but it took me about 2 or 3 years to really, when I came to know about the process, it took me a couple of years, 2.5 years, 3 years to actually learn the process and be a member. So it all starts with getting two strong recommendations from your peers. And these recommendations can happen, from a existing member of the Recording Academy, a non-member but is a significant name, or it can be both non-members, or it can be a combination. So it's not really a hard and fast rule right here, but it's always recommended that at least one recommendation should be from a person who is already a member. So you get two recommendations um, on registered on the same email. It's a simple form that you have to fill. Like, I know this person, through this. This is how I've known, him or her, and this is how long I've known them, and this is what they do, and this is why we think they should become a member. And then, once you have those recommendations, you get a full, like a link to a dashboard where you have to. It takes several hours to fill that. Usually you should sit with it for 2-3 days, because you really have to, like, basically basically give out all the information about your career. You fill that out, you submit that, and if you get accepted, you learn about your late June every year if you've been accepted as a member of the Recording Academy. Me, I got accepted as a member, as a professional member first, and then when I had enough credits, I applied to be a voting member when I had enough producer credits, co-producer credits, A&R credits, and that's how I became a voting member. So for voting members, you need enough credits, in the liner notes on DSPs, as a producer, a co-producer, somebody who's actually involved with making of the music. So that's how you become a member if you do end up becoming a member. Uh, these are just simple, do's and don'ts. You have to get two recommendations. You have to, make sure that it's all accurate information. You have to select the appropriate membership, obviously voting and or professional. You can't provide a self recommendation, and of course you have to, do it in time so that it's not very last minute. This is how the Grammys work. So how it works is, once your works are submitted, so for example, I submit your album for consideration for, say, best pop album. That first goes through a screening committee. The screening committee basically sits on all the submissions. In total, every year, on an average, there are about 20,000 submissions that come through, like 20,000. In the pop genre, in the hip hop genre, there are a lot. We see, usually about 700 to 800 submissions that come through from all over the world. The screening committee decides, okay, this song or this album is fit and is in the accurate category that it's submitted for. So you can't say like, hey, it's a rock song and now I'm submitting it for in the pop category, or it's Kendrick Lamar, Not Like Us, and I'm submitting it for best pop song or best pop vocal performance. That will be shifted to the other category, the appropriate category, by the screening committee. So once the screening committee sits over all these recordings, over all the eligibility, of course, there are eligibility criteria. For example, for last year awards that took place this year in February, um, recordings only between September 16, 2023 to August 30th to 2024 were eligible. So recordings which were released between this period only they can be submitted for the Grammy Awards and not outside. And there's other criteria. Obviously, it has to be minimum 5 songs if it's an album, minimum playing time of 15 minutes, and things of that sort. So once the screening committee clears it, it goes to, the ballot, and we as members, we have to then we get a link to a dashboard, a secure link. We have to log in there, and we get all of the submissions, the 300, 400, 500 submissions right in front of us. And now we have to pick, we get 5 picks. So every category, if it's say best new artist, we can select 5 best new artists that we think are like the top 5 for us. And whoever gets the most votes across approximately 13,000 voting members across the world, whoever gets the most votes, they get nominated for that award. And then there's a second round which decides the winners. So all of those nominations, they appear right in front of us. The 8, for example, the 8 nominations in the general categories, and we have to pick the one. Then we only get one pick, so we have to choose. Okay, this one is my pick for song of the year, record of the year. So that's how broadly, the award process takes place. Only, of course, only voting members are allowed to vote, and this is the only award, only major award um, in the world which is actually voted by the peers. There is no secret committee. There is no board that decides. The weekend, hit a huge controversy 2 years ago when his album or songs were not nominated. And he's like, abolish the secret committee. And he tweeted a lot in anger. There is no secret committee. The peers, which is, for example, a person like me, 13,000 people from across the world vote on what we think should be nominated and should win the Grammy Award. Um, of course, there's over the last few years, there's been a lot of focus on diversity, a lot of women focused plans. So it's actually skewed towards women now, apparently the voting membership. And that has also resulted in more women winning, which is great, more Black artists winning, more colored artists winning and getting nominated. So it's a lot more diversified now. So, and we've seen that in the results now. It's a lot less questionable results over the last few years than it used to be before. Shockers like Macklemore winning over Kendrick, you know things of that sort. They happen a lot less now because of diversity, because it's so diversified now. So this is like a, just a quick reference guide of the categories that we get as members. We get like a whole um a whole digital booklet of rules and categories that we are supposed to go through when we have to vote. So these are just grouped in categories. The the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that about 85 to 90% of the awards are actually given out in a ceremony called the premiere ceremony before the main Grammy Awards, which get televised. So the awards that you see on TV, those are mainly for, the big awards, the grand awards, of course, for TV ratings and to pull the biggest artists. And there's a couple of awards from hip hop, which are best rap album, which are given away there. But a lot of the hip hop categories also are given away in a ceremony, in a 3 hour ceremony that takes place right before the Grammy Awards. And to be honest, I've attended both, and that ceremony is actually way more fun because it's a lot more intimate, and you get to see the artists from a lot closer, and even the live performances from a lot closer. It's quite fun, and it's intimate, it's fun, it's relaxed. The main ceremony is, you don't get to sit too close, and there's a lot of like decorum, and it's televised, so you have to stand up in a certain way and just sit at a certain time because it's televised. These are just a few submission tips. So when you are submitting recordings for the Grammy Awards, these are just the a few of the, as I was talking about the eligibility. It was September 16, 2023 to August 30th, 2024. This year's eligibility is not announced yet. So any recording which is, if it was released September, if it was September 1 September 1, 2024, that recording will go into this year's process, not the last year. Yeah, must be commercially released in the US. Album must contain 5 tracks, total playing of at least 15 minutes. These are just some of the some of the rules. Something which is very essential is proper liner notes when we are submitting recordings. There has to be all the relevant information: producers, co-producers, session players, publishers, mix engineers, mastering engineers. Every person has to be credited on that sheet. Publishing company, it cannot be left behind. Just in case something is left behind and that recording gets dominated, the person who is left behind, in very extremely rare cases, they allow it to be edited later. Once it's submitted, it's submitted. Um, and that person will not get an award or a certification. So it's that serious. So it's very, very important. And of course, if any vital information is missing, they get rejected. This is again, this video will not play. It was like a one couple minutes video. This is actually a look at the dashboard of the submission. So when we are submitting recordings to be considered for nomination, this is how it looks like. Um, they started making the submissions paid now after 5 courtesy entries. So, for example, if I am submitting on somebody's behalf, I submit for some of my artist friends, some of somebody from outside, some people from here as well. Whatever I think deserves to be submitted, I help them out. But I only get 5 free entries, and then after that it's $75, and then $40 and $75 depending on the time manner where when it's submitted. But yeah, that's how the dashboard looks like. It's it's not a difficult process, but you have to be extremely careful in submitting because the primary artist, the featured artist, the credits, photo, contact information, each and everything is supposed to be like absolutely 100% accurate. This is a label copy credits page that we have to fill compulsorily. Like this is something that has to be submitted each time we are submitting a recording here in the process. So all of this information has to be submitted along with this submission. That was all.